So thank you, Ben, for joining me today. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello, I'm Ben. I'm the family IT guy, and I'm here to help parents keep their kids safe online, kind of like you.
Yeah, I know it's really nice to be able to sit down and talk to somebody who really understands and gets like what's going on. What kind of motivated you to start in the IT field? Because you've had a pretty interesting career path.
I have been very fortunate to have a very interesting career. Um, the thing that got me started was my dad. So he fostered my hobbies as a kid. So when I was 10, he brought home a Tandy computer with I want to say it was an 8086 processor. And the cool thing is that he actually let me play with it, right? Because it was like
Hmm.
$2,000.
Oh yeah, that's an adult
And,
toy. You don't touch that as a kid.
it's an adult toy, and we weren't a family with like a bunch of extra cash to be like, who cares? But he let me play with it. He let me modify DOS. He let me just go in there and just mess around with stuff. And then on the weekends for fun, I wanted to go to the computer store and like study all the motherboards and all the hard drives and all the things. And then he would actually drive me to the computer store. Long story short, the computer store saw me coming in all the time. And when I was 14, they're like, hey, if you're old enough to come work here, you should come work here. And so I did. And I was by far the worst salesperson to ever enter a computer store because I just gave everybody technical advice and I tried to help them save as much money as possible. so, so I ended up a customer of the computer store hired me to work with him in his IT consulting business. And then I got exposed to like managing computers for companies. Long story short, ended up running like really large data centers for a defense contractor, like the kind that you see in the movies with like robotic arms and raised floors and rows and rows and rows of servers. I had to wear a big jacket every time I went in there because it was super cold. And then the so I worked for a defense contractor that did $10 billion a year in IT business. So they were an IT provider to the government. And I ended up being the chief technologist, long story short, of that division of the company. And so I was the sort of senior technical strategist for this $10 billion IT company. Then I went on to work for BlackBerry, and eventually, BlackBerry tanked, and then I became an entrepreneur. And my brother and I started a bunch of companies, and so I've been in the game like 30 years, and I've gotten to be associated and involved with the NSA. I've gotten to get tours of submarines and aircraft carriers and missiles and all kinds of tanks and aircraft and all this stuff. And so I like to say that I spent much of my career doing national security, and now I do family security. So now I'm totally focused on, and I spend most of my time on helping parents understand what they need to know in order to keep their kids safe on the internet.
And that's really appreciated, and that's very needed. So you've had this like amazing career. You've done all of this stuff, and then one day it's like, hey, I'm just gonna help families. Like, is there kind of walk me through what that thought process was like, and like that fear of getting started as an entrepreneur again, like especially in social media when that's where a whole lot of parents are right now.
Yeah, well, I got into this family security thing by just the natural course of events by having a kid of my own. And so I have a kid. Um, I know all these things about technology, right? I understand the behind the scenes of how all the systems work. I can picture them in my mind. I know what's happening, not only with the bits and the bytes, but also with the business, because I've
Mm.
been fortunate to get exposed to the business that's behind technology. So I understand the incentive mechanisms. I understand the people structures. I understand what they're trying to accomplish as a business and what I'm trying to accomplish as a person and as a parent. Nonetheless, I made a ton of mistakes. I gave my kid a tablet. I gave my kid an iPad. Looking back on that, I'm like, why did I do that? I just introduced a precedent. For what, right? At the time, I thought it was for entertainment and for education. of like, hey, like I'm a tech guy. I should expose my kid to tech so that he can learn and he can start to play and do what I did when I was 10. I got to play with computers, but there was no internet. This, because for
Right.
me, that was in 1990. And so all of a sudden he's watching super inappropriate stuff on YouTube. Right. And I go, okay, oh crap. Of course. Okay. YouTube, fine. Strip off YouTube. Let's put on YouTube Kids because it has the word kids at the end. So it's got to be for kids.
Sure, of
Right.
course. Right. Right. Yeah.
Now, what I've learned through my experience in the business world is that you have two things in a business. You have marketing and you have reality. And so
Very true.
YouTube Kids is the marketing. The reality is a product that's so widely used that the filtering mechanisms cannot be completely accurate. And so then he's watching inappropriate and like scary, like nightmare stuff. He had nightmares for years because of what he saw on YouTube Kids.
Right.
Like this Huggy Wuggy character with like the sharp teeth and he's always trying to come out and scare people. And the crazy part is that my son and some of his friends, in their minds, they liked Huggy Wuggy. Yet we're having nightmares every single night about Huggy Wuggy on YouTube Kids. Okay, sorry, kid, that I just exposed you to that. Whoops, my bad, really. Okay, take away YouTube Kids. Okay, so now he's got this iPad and we got a stylus so he could draw, and there's like some educational games, whatever. Like, but then the underlying mechanisms that I knew were there, I watched them work on a child's brain. I watched him become addicted and demonstrate addictive behavior patterns just to the device itself, to the iPad, let alone the applications that were on the iPad. So it's disrupting the time that he would wake up early to play on it. He would go to sleep later because he wanted to play on it. He would come home from school, and instead of wanting to go ride his bike or play basketball or go chat with his friends, he wanted to play on the iPad. The thing was drawing him in like a drug would draw somebody in. And so we had to take away the iPad completely. And that was a really good move. That and it's still, that was a difficult thing to do for him and for us, but it's my job as a parent to establish precedents. It's my job to recognize and correct for mistakes. And so I did that. And then so now he has an Apple Watch, and that Apple Watch, it has a cell phone in it. It's the cellular version, and it's completely locked down. So there's nothing on the device that's attractive. The device is a functional tool that fulfills emergency communication scenarios. And so it's great. He's not drawn to it. He can just use it when he needs to call us, and we can use it when we need to call him, and we can filter who he can talk to. And so that's how I got into like, okay, so I'm an expert in technology. I'm certainly not an expert in children, although I'm trying to do my best.
Right.
So if I'm stumbling through this and finding out the hard way, what about all the people that are not experts, that haven't spent 30 years studying computer systems? What are they doing? And so I start talking to my friends and starting to talk to my consulting clients. And like, it turns out that like nobody has any idea what to do, right? Like this is like a new thing. This is like a new category that's just occurred in the world of parenting. Up until 2007, raising a child looked roughly the same. And then in 2007, the iPhone was introduced. And a few years later, those iPhones started to trickle down to kids. As parents would get the new one, they'd give the kid the old one. And then all of a sudden, now there's a new category of parenting, and nobody has any idea what to do about it. So that's my mission now, is how do I make digital safety accessible to parents and to kids?
Right. And that is a tall task. I mean, you have not stepped into something that is easy by any stretch. So I appreciate that you're, I appreciate that you're using all of your skills that you have, and now trying to be an expert parent, like you were saying, but I think,
Yeah.
a lot of people are going to empathize with your story here, because they like in 2007, or, I was out of the house by '07, but like my parents didn't have to worry about this. Your parents didn't have to worry about this. I didn't worry about this as a teenager.
Right.
You didn't either. And, I feel like
Yeah.
we just got our feet under us about, okay, this is what we can do. And now this new kid on the block called AI has come on and has just completely thrown everything upside down. What's your big concern with kids and AI today?
It's well, so the short version is healthy skepticism.
Hmm.
So kids are, you know, trusting by nature, right? We start off as like trusting little humans, and then we get chopped up a little bit. We become a little less trusting as we age, but we start off as like super trusting, and then there's these systems now that communicate in the ways that we do as humans, because that's what they're designed to do, but they're not built to be honest. They're not
Hmm.
built to be truthful. They're not even necessarily built to be useful. They can be useful. And so you expose a child to a system that talks like them and sounds like them and knows how to communicate with them. And so the kid is going to by default think that like, oh, whatever comes out of this thing is true. And then they're studying for their fourth grade history class, and they're going back and looking at World War II or something, or what, let's say eighth grade history or whatever. And the Nazis have black skin and, or like Asian women. And like, these are like real images that
Right,
have
right.
come out of Google Gemini. And like George Washington was black, and the founding fathers of the U.S. were Native Americans, and all this kind of stuff, which in it like by itself, like for adults, like that's a fun conversation to be like, oh gosh, that's kind of funny, we can talk about
Hmm.
that and laugh it off. But for kids, I mean, why that's true by default. That's true, right? Like the system said that that's the thing, and so I'm really concerned with the intersection of a child's brain and truth. And like I focus on that as a parent a lot, and as a person for myself, like I'm interested in truth. And these are systems that are not necessarily interested in truth, and it's very troublesome. Um, Yet it is the reality, and so now it's upon us to teach our kids how to be skeptical and how to take in. It's actually, whenever I see these giant problems, there's a side of it that's actually really good, because the bigger the problem is and the more sort of simple in nature that the problem is, the easier it is for a child to digest.
Hmm.
So the more nuanced the thing is, perhaps the young child, especially younger children, will struggle more with nuance. But if you present them with this simple concept that like, hey, when you're communicating with a person or with a computer that you don't personally know and don't have a personal direct relationship with, it's good to be skeptical. And here's what that means. And here's how you can practice the beginnings of critical thinking. So there's actually like a really cool opportunity here to run through exercises with kids to show the problems that it can occur in an AI system and practice critical thinking. Because if you can practice critical thinking and you use these tools that are troublesome with which to do that, and a kid can become a critical thinker, they can apply that to every other aspect of life. And that's amazing. And so, but I think we have to take the hard part is just like the rest of this whole, like, how do you keep a kid safe on the internet? Like, oh gosh, there's a million things to worry about. AI is another one. So there's complexity there. But if we boil it down and we just say, here's how to filter information from strangers or from unknown sources. I think there's some cool opportunities.
Right. I think we're handing our kids this really big tool, and some of it is accurate and some of it is not going to be. But yeah, critical thinking is something that I'll say this kind of as a joke. I think more of us in America need to think critically, and I'm hoping that these sorts of
Yeah.
conversations will help folks to do that. But I really feel for our kids today, we absolutely need to teach them, hey, let's verify what we're doing first before we do it. And so that way, as they grow into adulthood, hopefully they will see things like on whatever the future like Facebook is and know, okay, that's not true. Whereas people today are seeing things on Facebook and automatically believing it's true. So hopefully we can
Yeah.
progress there.
I hope so, man. And I think we can. I really think we can if we have the right exposure to guidance and values. I think we can.
Sure. And that's a great point. And that's been the baseline of parenting for so long, right? We just got to keep that going in this digital age. So Ben, let me ask you this. We are
Yeah.
now in summer, and so kids are out of school. They have more free time on their hands. Kids today don't like to be bored. So what sort of screen time boundaries do we need to set up for the summer?
Oh, that's such a good question. Because summertime is so often like, well, we're gonna, watch the random like afternoon movie that we wouldn't watch during the school year or something, right? Like on a Wednesday. Um, it's a great opportunity to practice moderation. It's a
Hmm.
great opportunity to embrace boredom. Like you mentioned, boredom. Boredom is a good thing. Boredom is
It
good,
is.
man. Like when you're left
Hmm.
with your mind and it's just you and your mind, that is valuable. I feel like I don't know always how to put it into scientific terms, but I just have this idea in my head that we all operate at certain frequencies. And I feel like with a lot of stimulation, I envision in my mind that the frequency increases. So, like the baseline for stimulation goes up, right? And it's just stimulus, stimulus, stimulus. And then boredom is the lack of stimulus. And then if the baseline for stimulus is high, and then boredom is down here at zero, then the ability to achieve boredom and to appreciate and sit in it is reduced. And so I think looking at things with respect to stimulus levels is important. And so if we are going to watch a movie, play a show, play a game, I like to look at these things, especially for younger kids, like what's the stimulus level? How often do the scenes change? How bright are the colors? How loud are the sounds?
Sure.
A lot of these modern shows, like I think of this show, there's a one called Dog Man. They just had a movie come out and a lot of the
Hmm.
young
Hmm.
boys are into it. And my goodness, man, if you look at how frequently the scenes change, it's like boom, 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 like the whole time. It actually made me fall asleep, A, because I wasn't interested. We went to the movie theaters and watched it,
Right.
but also because it was just like too much. And so for summertime, I would encourage parents to look at like what kind of stimulus, what's our stimulus baseline? And sometimes we're going to bump that up and we're going to just do just entertaining for the sake of entertainment in moderation, but like try like value keeping those frequencies low, value sitting in boredom, value like wandering around and be like, I have nothing to do. So I wonder what that tree is like over there. Let me go climb it. Let me sit at the bottom of it and just like put my fingers in the grass, like that. Like, now, here's the thing, right? So you can say that to a kid, but as parents, our job is to lead by example and to set precedents.
Right.
How how do we embrace boredom, and do we do it together? What do we do when there's a lull? Do we go for the stimulus that we're used to? Because we're all doing the same thing as adults, right? Like there's supposedly like 5 billion people on social media. Well, social media is an addictive chemical, right? It elicits an addictive chemical in our brains. It elicits a dopamine drip. And so, okay, so like most people, most adults are doing that. So like, what are we showing our kids? And how do we lead by example? How do we set the precedent for them that boredom is good, that boredom's okay, that we can sit in the car without a screen, that we can go outside and just look. So we have to do that with them, right? So like as the summer approaches now, like summer is here, like my kid is on summer vacation now. Um, you know, it'd be hard to go like a full 180 and say, okay, kid, up until this point, I've been demonstrating to you that we're going to go for stimulus all the time, but today is summer vacation, so now we're going to stop. It's a hard sell, right? So
Right.
like these
Yeah.
things, you have to work your way into it. And so I, with as much positivity as I can put it across with, I suggest and encourage parents to recognize that like we have to do it first, right? We have to model the behavior that we want them to see. And so, yeah, so those are kind of my thoughts on the
Yeah, I
summertime
know,
thing.
and I completely agree, and that's hard, because like I feel like our generation kind of just stumbled into social media and we got addicted, not even realizing that it was a thing. And here we are having to try to
Yeah,
get
that's
ourselves
right.
out of it and keep our kids out of it too. I hate it when I'm
Yeah.
sitting on the
Oh man.
couch and all of a sudden I reach for the phone and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish here? And it was just like, no, I just miss seeing
Yeah.
the phone. And I hate that about myself,
Yeah.
but I don't want that for my kid for sure.
Well, and I want to say that's okay. That is normal. That is expected. If we if we're to set up our kids for success, first we must set ourselves up for success. And sometimes the way we can do that is in unusual ways. For example, there are actually studies to show that when you place a phone in a different room than you are, that is a very effective way to break that, like, first of all, the physical ability to just have it within arm's
Mhm.
reach. But secondly, it puts enough barrier and enough friction in place so that it's effective. And so that's like a really great example of like something that we can practice as ourselves as individuals is like, let's set ourselves up for success by, for example, if it's the time of day that we want to demonstrate these things, put the phone in the other room. Like if we're in the living room, put it in the bedroom or vice versa. And the kids will see that. They will experience that. And they will experience the additional attention that they get, and the additional connection and the ability to have like a whimsical conversation, right? So I think, dude, it's a great example, and I'm there with you too. And I just want to tell people that it's not a shameful thing. It's normal. It's by design. We, like you said, we are fallen into this trap that we are just now starting to figure out. And so it's okay. It's totally normal. And we just have to practice getting ourselves out of it.
I really appreciate hearing you say that because, I was sitting here just being a whole lot harder on myself. But what you said make a lot of difference. And yeah, there are times that I will put the phone in the other room and I'm like, I'm not getting up for that. We'll do something else, that sort of thing. So
Right.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
That
man.
is awesome. So let me ask you
Yeah.
this, being that it's summer, what are some of the like parental controls and rules that we need to set up for our kids to make sure that when they do have permission to be online, that they're doing so safely?
Oh, it's a wonderful question. So, okay. This is a great opportunity to talk about the ways in which we can sort of simplify these very complicated problems of like safety. So, first, let's break it down into two pieces. Let's talk about mental health and physical safety. So, if we have a big safety bucket, we've got mental and physical. And then, so there are two sort of technical like ways we can attach technology to that. So, the mental side is the addiction side. If your kid is exposed to something with what you could call a bottomless feed, right? Scroll, 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 scroll. It keeps going, 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 going. It is bottomless, right? That's an algorithm,
Hmm.
usually, almost always. It's like a very simple way to identify, like, is this an algorithm? If it's an algorithm, it is designed explicitly to be addictive. That is the
Hmm.
business model of the software company that shows you the bottomless feed. They need as much of your attention as they can get. They literally measure their success by how much of your time they get. Okay.
Okay.
So mental health is associated with addictive algorithms, social media, and a lot of video platforms like YouTube, bottomless feeds. Physical side is exposure to strangers and exposure to predators. This is primarily facilitated via systems that have online chat. So we have two things to worry about as parents. Primarily, if we want to take like how do we knock 90% of the problems down with two things? Addictive algorithms, online chat. So let's talk a little bit about the online chat thing. So there are 5 billion people on social media. There's roughly 6 billion people on the internet. With every day that passes that I research this topic of how to keep kids safe on the internet, I learn more and more that the problem is bigger than I thought it was the day before. And it's very disheartening. And it's it's terrible. But there
Okay.
are a percentage of people that intentionally harm children and sometimes do it in ways that we don't even have to speak about.
Right.
And it happens at such a high frequency that we must pay attention to it. And I'll put it into very firm numbers. These two problems together, actually, both. There's two sort of statistics that are worth knowing about. The FBI measures and estimates about one suicide per month that's associated with a predator finding a child to victimize and using, for example, sextortion, where they elicit an image from the child and then they blackmail them, and some of those kids kill themselves. And I've been in tears reading about this and researching it. It's the most horrible thing. The other statistic that's worth knowing about with respect to safety in general, back to like the addictive algorithms, is that in the last, since roughly 2007, 2010, the suicide statistics, and I found this by accident. I was browsing the World Health Organization's death certificate database because I read a lot about depression and anxiety. And I was like, okay, like the ultimate sort of outcome in the worst case scenarios is suicide. And so what are the trends? Like, are we actually what's the impact on this? And it turns out that I found that some data that indicates that the impact is very severe. So between the ages of 10 and 24, suicide rates have increased by 300 to 400% since 2007. Suicide is now the number 2 leading cause of death amongst young people. So we have automotive accidents are number 1, suicide is number 2, and homicide is number 3. And they actually match up the same between boys and girls. It's those 3.
Wow.
When I found that out, this was in December. I found this, I think, December of 24. Everything changed. I was like, okay, I'd given lectures prior to finding this data. I've given lectures to parents talking about this topic, right? Where I talk about moderation. Okay, if you're going to give your kids social media, if you're going to put them on a platform that exposes them to online chat, here's the parental controls and here's the tools and this and that. And then I found out the data and I was like, okay, for me, there's no more moderation. Like these things are so extremely dangerous for kids that my opinion is that we should set our kids up for success by not exposing them to these drugs and to these predators. And so, okay, so let's tie it back together. How do we keep our kids safe on the internet this summer? What controls do we leverage? So firstly, identify the systems that they use and see if they have bottomless feeds. If they do, consider in an extreme scenario, which I suggest, although it's simple to say, removing them. Secondarily, practice moderation leverage the tools that are built into the systems in order to moderate the amount of time that is spent to minimize the impact of the addictive chemicals. So iPhones, Androids, Chromebooks, Windows computers, Mac computers, they all have free parental controls built in that allow you to restrict the time that gets spent per app. I recommend taking advantage of that. The other thing is on the online chat. How do we protect our kids from predators? Many of the systems, like the games that have online chat, Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, they all have free parental controls that allow you to turn off online chat. I very much suggest that you do that. That is, the statistics are horrifying, like I was mentioning. Snapchat alone, Snapchat internally identified 3 years ago that there were 10,000 reported cases of sextortion per month just on Snapchat. Just on 3 years ago. Those are the ones that are reported.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the ones that are reported.
So if we look across Roblox, Fortnite, all these, there's a research report that called Roblox a pedophile hellscape. The online chat is the tool that facilitates that. So I would recommend eliminating and or heavily reducing exposure to algorithms, and reducing or eliminating exposure to online chat with strangers.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I will even say that as an adult, when I game, I don't turn on the chat with other people either, because generally it's just a negative experience that as an adult, I don't want to have to deal with. Like, I get, taken out by somebody and I end up like 56 out of 100. I'm like, yeah, I don't need you rubbing that in, that sort of thing. So like, don't do it as an adult. Certainly don't let your kids do it as well. It's just better off for everybody's mental health. So yeah, great point there. So let me ask you this. You talked about seeing signs of addiction in your son. You've read all of this research. You've been doing this. What are some of the red flags that we need to look for in our children that either says, one, okay, they are becoming addicted to these bottomless algorithms, or maybe something has happened in an online chat that has made them uncomfortable? What are those red flags we need to look for?
That's a great question, and it's one of the more challenging components, because as kids age, they go through different things, right? Like their behavior patterns change, and one of the signs of addiction is the change in behavior patterns. But one of the ways that's easiest to tell is if the technology thing, the tablet, the computer, the gaming system, if that is removed, or like if they want to play it right now and you say no, how do they react? The reaction can tell you a lot, right? So you have extreme examples that you can find online on YouTube and social media of kids losing it, like full blown. Like if you were to take a meth addict and go cold turkey, and that's that, like freaking out. And just like how you and I, it's normal for us to be addicted to these things. This also is not a judgment on the child. This is normal. This is expected. This is by design.
Right.
And so if you remove the technology, or you say, and there's a lot of nuance here, right? Because kids also, just like the rest of us, they want to identify patterns and expectations. Okay, every day at 6 o'clock, I get to do this thing, let's say. Well, if you change the thing, if you just rip it out of their hands, they'll explode, because like that's not a way to introduce change. So you have to like know your kid of obviously how do you introduce change? But if you can run some little bite-sized experiments, and like if you introduce change into their technology environment, how extreme is their reaction? And that will indicate to you how sort of chemically tied to the device they are. And so it's, because there's a lot of, I've interviewed some parents whose kids have been victims of sextortion, and on a similar sort of topic, like what do we look for in our kids to see if they're become victims? It's some similar stuff. It's like, well, their behavior changed. They started doing weird stuff. They started changing the way their room looks. They started dressing different. Well, did they turn 13 or did they become a victim of sextortion? You know?
Right.
Um, and so then below all that is the relationship dynamic and the transparency and the communication of how comfortable is my kid to come to me with problems. And these are things that, of course, don't develop overnight. Like this is just part of the family dynamic. And so, ongoing communication. Sometimes you can see, does my kid know more than they should about a certain topic?
Sure.
Do they all of a sudden know a little too much about something that's beyond their age? Like that could indicate an unhealthy exposure to something on the internet.
Well, that's a good point. And I think a lot of that just goes back to you have to observe your kid. Like we have to take our own faces out of our phones and actually see what's going on with our kids. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Ben, as we wrap up here, I'm going to completely steal this question from a friend of mine in his podcast. But if you could put one message on a billboard for everyone to see about this, what's the message?
That's so good, man.
I know. It's not even my question.
It's the best because it's like, because narrow one thing. What's the one thing? It would be a question. It would be in as big a letters as I could fit on the billboard. What do you value?
Yeah.
Okay. Something to inspire thought. What do I value? So I drive by the billboard. I'm on my way to work. I'm on my way back from work. What do I value? What do I value? God, let me think about that. And then next time something occurs, or I'm staring at my phone or I'm doing a thing or I'm having a conversation with my wife or my kid, what do I value? I just had the opportunity. I'm 44. I just wrote down my values for the first time, like 2 weeks ago. Nobody ever asked me or introduced that to me prior.
Right.
What do I value? It was awesome. It was so fun. I wrote down a whole page full of stuff. But what was awesome. Cool is after I wrote down the page full of stuff, as I went back and what were the first 3 that I wrote down? And it was fun to see what those were. And so, because they'll be a little different for everybody, right? And this is where the beauty of humans come in, is we all have our different cultures and social norms and values. What are those values? And then if we identify them for ourselves, I told my son what mine were. Here are my values. And then I translated them into, so therefore my strategy as a parent to you is as follows. And then I documented my strategy and I told him what it was. It was amazing. He was sitting there like, wow, this is cool. And so, yeah, what do you value?
What do you value? And can you find those values on an unending algorithm on social media? Can you?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's the real one. That's the real question.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, I know that I invited you on here to talk to my audience, but man, I really feel like you helped me a lot today as well, man. So I appreciate that.
I love that.
Yeah. So Ben, I know people,
really great.
They're going to want to know more about you and your mission. Where can they find you online?
So I have a website called familyitguy.com, and it's a huge free library of resources. And a lot of the organizational elements I spoke about today, you'll see that in the website. I kind of break stuff into these simplified categories, a lot of how-to guides and research and statistics. And then I have a TikTok channel and an Instagram and all the things, which is ironic, but I'm trying to go to where people are,
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so I'm on all the social medias and the YouTube and all that. And, would love to have you, anybody listening, use any of those resources any way you'd like, and, reach out to me if you need help.
All right, man. I appreciate this so much. I've learned a lot from you. It's just been good just to sit here and talk to you and just get your perspective from one dad to another. I've really appreciated this, man. Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Andy. Cheers.